Today, we are taking a careful look at a claim circulating in Iraqi Dinar discussions concerning the possible deletion of 3 zeros from the currency, the introduction of lower denominations, and what these changes could mean for the purchasing power of the Iraqi Dinar. The comments we are analyzing come from an Iraq-focused discussion in which an individual identified as Omar says Iraqi television is repeatedly talking about deleting the zeros, while suggesting that the public is not being given a clear explanation of how purchasing power would actually be delivered through lower denominations. Frank 26 then offers a very different interpretation, arguing that deleting the 3 zeros would make the currency worth at least 76 cents, and that the currency could later move toward $1, $3.22, or even $4.25 outside Iraq, while the internal objective would be 1-to-1. Before going any further, there is an important distinction that every Iraqi dinar follower should understand. A statement made by a commentator, even if repeated frequently, is not the same thing as an official exchange rate announcement from the Central Bank of Iraq. The figures of 76 cents, $1, $3.22, and $4.25 presented in this discussion should therefore be treated as opinions or scenarios, not confirmed rates. There is currently no basis in this paragraph alone to conclude that the Central Bank of Iraq has announced any of these values. The most important part of the discussion is actually the reference to deleting 3 zeros. This is a monetary reform concept that has been discussed in Iraq for years. In simple terms, removing 3 zeros can mean redenomination. For example, a hypothetical 25,000 dinar note could be replaced by a 25 dinar denomination under a redenomination system. The numbers printed on the currency become smaller, but that does not automatically mean the real economic value of the currency increases. This is where the difference between redenomination and revaluation becomes critical. Redenomination changes the numerical expression of prices, wages, balances, and currency denominations. Revaluation, on the other hand, changes the exchange value of the currency against other currencies. These two concepts can occur together under certain monetary reforms, but one does not automatically guarantee the other. That distinction directly addresses the disagreement in the report. Omar describes the television discussion as focusing on deleting the zeros without explaining how purchasing power would be established through lower denominations. That is an economically important question. If Iraq were to introduce a new currency structure, the authorities would need to explain the conversion process, exchange periods, treatment of bank deposits, salaries, contracts, prices, accounting systems, and the relationship between old and new denominations. For example, imagine that authorities establish a simple 3-0 conversion ratio. A price of 25,000 old dinars could become 25 new dinars. If a worker earned 2 million old dinars, that could become 2,000 new dinars under the same conversion ratio. In that example, the number of dinars changes dramatically, but the person's underlying purchasing power does not automatically increase. The same goods would need to be repriced according to the official conversion framework. This is why viewers should be cautious when hearing that deleting 3 zeros would automatically produce a specific dollar value. The removal of zeros by itself does not mathematically establish a new international exchange rate. A future exchange rate would depend on monetary policy, foreign exchange conditions, inflation, reserves, fiscal policy, market confidence, banking sector development, and the framework chosen by the monetary authorities. The claim that deleting 3 zeros would definitely make the currency worth at least 76 cents therefore requires substantial evidence before it can be considered an established financial fact. A number like 76 cents needs to come from an identifiable official policy document, an exchange rate announcement, or a transparent calculation based on published monetary data. Without that evidence, it remains a forecast or interpretation. The same principle applies to the much higher numbers mentioned in the discussion, including $3.22 and $4.25. These are extremely significant exchange rate claims, and they should not be presented to viewers as confirmed outcomes. For the Iraqi dinar to reach such levels against the US dollar, the economic and monetary framework supporting that valuation would need to be clearly established. That would involve much more than simply changing the appearance or denomination structure of Iraqi banknotes. For Iraqi dinar followers, the real issue is purchasing power. Purchasing power is not determined by the face value printed on a banknote. It is determined by what that currency can actually buy domestically and internationally. If a redenomination occurs, while wages, prices, deposits, and exchange relationships are converted proportionally, people may hold fewer numerical units of currency without becoming richer in real terms. At the same time, a successful monetary reform could have important long-term benefits if it is implemented alongside broader economic reforms. A cleaner denomination structure can make accounting easier, reduce the number of zeros used in everyday transactions, simplify financial reporting, and potentially improve public confidence in the currency system. But these benefits depend on implementation, credibility, and macroeconomic stability. For the short term, the most important thing for viewers to watch is official communication. If Iraq moves toward a genuine 3-0 reform, the Central Bank of Iraq and other relevant institutions would need to provide clear details about the conversion rate, old and new notes, withdrawal procedures, deadlines, banking treatment, and effect on prices and financial contracts. Those details would be far more important than social media claims about a future exchange rate. Another important consideration is Iraq's banking sector. Monetary reform cannot be separated from banking reform. If citizens continue to prefer holding large amounts of cash outside the formal banking system, changing denominations alone will not solve the underlying problem. A stronger banking system, greater confidence in deposits, improved electronic payments, compliance with international standards, and greater integration with the global financial system would all be relevant to the long-term strength of the Iraqi dinar. This also explains why the idea of purchasing power through lower denominations needs careful interpretation. Lower denominations can make everyday transactions more convenient, but they do not create purchasing power by themselves. Real purchasing power ultimately comes from economic productivity, price stability, stable monetary policy, confidence in the financial system, and the ability of the economy to generate sustainable income. Looking at the longer-term picture, Iraq has substantial economic potential, particularly through its energy resources. But the country also faces structural challenges: oil dependence, fiscal pressures, banking sector modernization, private sector development, inflation management, and international financial integration all matter when assessing the future of the dinar. For viewers following the Iraqi dinar, the best approach is therefore to separate three different questions. First, is Iraq considering or implementing a redenomination? Second, what official conversion mechanism would be used if such a reform occurs? And third, what exchange rate would the central bank actually establish or maintain against the dollar and other currencies? Those questions should not be combined into one assumption. The current discussion provides an interesting example of why that separation matters. The television comments described in the report may indicate that the concept of deleting zeros is receiving attention, but attention is not the same as implementation. Frank 26's interpretation goes further by attaching specific dollar values to the potential reform, but those values remain unverified within the information provided. So, for Iraqi dinar followers, the responsible conclusion is neither to dismiss the possibility of monetary reform, nor to assume that a dramatic exchange rate increase is guaranteed. Instead, watch for formal announcements, official regulations, central bank publications, changes to currency denominations, banking instructions, and clearly documented exchange rate policy. If Iraq eventually announces a redenomination program, the first reaction should be to study the conversion rules rather than immediately focusing on a predicted dollar value. Ask what happens to existing banknotes, bank deposits, salaries, contracts, government payments, and prices. Then examine whether the reform is purely a redenomination or whether it includes a separate change to the exchange rate regime. In the short term, uncertainty could produce confusion among consumers and businesses if communication is not clear. In the long term, however, a well-designed reform accompanied by stronger institutions could contribute to a more efficient monetary and financial system. The key word is implementation. A currency reform becomes economically meaningful through policy, execution, and confidence, not through rumors or predictions alone. And that brings us back to the central claim in today's discussion. The idea that deleting 3 zeros automatically creates a 76-cent dinar, followed by $1, $3, $22, or $4.25 should be treated as speculation, unless and until Iraqi authorities officially establish those values. The potential deletion of zeros is a separate issue from the future international purchasing power of the Iraqi dinar. For now, the most responsible position is to monitor the Central Bank of Iraq and other official Iraqi institutions for verifiable information. If an official monetary reform is announced, we will examine the conversion mechanics, the exchange rate implications, the effect on Iraqi citizens, and what the policy could mean for the broader economy. Thank you for watching Iraqi Dinar News. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you want responsible, factual, and balanced updates on the Iraqi dinar and Iraq's economy. We will continue separating confirmed developments from speculation so that you can follow the story with a clear understanding of what is actually known. Remember, this content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any currency.